Hello and welcome to our webinar, Fall Adult Faves. I'm Annie Bostrom, Senior Editor for Adult Books at Booklist. Before we begin today, I'd like to go over some technical details. Links to today's slide presentation and title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom an hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the links located there. You can also download the slides and title list by typing the URLs on this screen into your browser. And if you have any trouble accessing these materials, please just email us at webinars@booklistonline.com. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a button for Q&A. If you have a question or need any tech assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar today. Booklist offers closed captioning on all of our webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the captions icon on the toolbar mentioned earlier. From there, you can select show or hide captions from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting Captions Settings. And finally, Booklist expects all participants to maintain an atmosphere of respect and fairness. Anyone who violates this standard of behavior, including engaging in any form of harassment, may, at the discretion of the organizers, be immediately removed. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Samantha Slavin, Library Marketing Coordinator at Macmillan, Melissa Croce, Senior Marketing Manager at Simon & Schuster, Golda Rademacher, Library Sales and Marketing Director at W.W. Norton Company, Yesenia Corporon, Wholesale Sales and Academic and Library Marketing Coordinator at Hachette Book Group, and Elham Mali, Trade Marketing Lead at ECW Press. First, we'll hear from Samantha Slavin. Samantha is the Library Marketing Coordinator for Macmillan Library Marketing. Samantha owes her love of books to years of NYPL visits growing up and can always be found with a book. The floor is yours, Samantha.
No, here we go. Thank you so much. Again, I'm Samantha. I'm so excited to be here today. But before we get to the books, I have a little housekeeping also. Here are all the various ways you can get in touch with us. We love hearing from you, so please reach out with any questions, concerns, or any kind of requests. Next slide. If you would like to download Macmillan eGalleys on Edelweiss, here's how. The instructions can also be found on our website, and you can always feel free to email me. And next slide. If you are not already coming to Happy Half Hour, make sure you do that. That is our weekly book talking series airing every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern, where we highlight upcoming adult and YA titles, and sometimes we have some special author guests. And our next episode will be happening this coming Monday. So you can also register for that on the link here or also on our website. And next slide. And if you would like to learn more about all of our book club resources, check out our big book club resource page on the website to find discussion guides, sweepstakes, book club news, and so much more. And now we are ready to get to the books next. First up today is The Porcelain Maker. This is an emotionally wrenching love story about a brilliant and talented Jewish architect who falls in love with a beautiful and charismatic German artist. And it becomes her mission to save him when he's imprisoned in Dachau. His fate is based on the exquisite porcelain figures that he creates, and she would rather die than live without him. Over 60 years later, her daughter is on a journey to discover the identity of her father, the father that her mother kept a secret her whole life. The writing here is just so lyrical and evocative. You won't believe that is the author's debut, and it's based on a real place, a real SS-run porcelain factory, a subcamp of Dachau where inmates supplied the forced labor. Next, Yours for the Taking. I'm actually reading this one right now, and it is so eerie and incredibly written. I highly recommend, and speculative fiction is just having a huge recent success, and this will fit right in with Station 11, Severance, and The School for Good Mothers. Here we have a feminist utopia and dystopia with a story about the control and failings of white corporate feminism. It's a queer debut set in the year 2050 with Ava, who loves her life, but finds it hard to be happy in a world where climate change is rapidly creating an unsafe environment. But there is the Inside Project, which is a series of weather-safe structures around the world that guarantee the survival of accepted applicants. And as Ava begins to work on the project, she and a few other women start to notice some cracks in the system. This is a haunting yet beautiful dystopian story that will leave readers with much to think and talk about. Next slide. After the Forest. This is a dark and enchanting take on my personal favorite fairy tale, Hansel and Gretel, and fairy tale retellings are really having their moment right now. And this one is just so dark and enchanting, and it has the best twist. It has baking magic. The magic in this book literally has its own voice and its own motives and cannot be ignored. But this isn't Hansel's story. This is Gretel's story, or Greta in the book. It's been 20 years since Greta and Hans were trapped in the gingerbread house, and it has not gone well. They're in debt, Hans has a gambling problem, and Greta has a secret. Their witch has been whispering in her ear for the past 2 decades, and the whispers are about the best gingerbread you've ever tasted, and also their only hope for staying afloat. But can Greta stay out of the town's gossip and suspicion as dark magic is returning to the woods? She can only save herself, Hans, and their town if the dark magic doesn't kill her first. Fans of Alex E. Harrow, Other Birds, and Nettle and Bone will fall in love with this debut. Next slide. Bookshops and Bone Dust. This is a prequel following coffee shop owner Viv from Legends and Lattes, which was a library reach pick, so I think a lot of you will be excited for this. And Viv is still in her career with a notorious mercenary company sent to recuperate from an injury in a sleepy beach town, and spending her hours at a bookshop in trouble in the company of its foul-mouthed proprietor. It's so cozy and such a great setting, like the first book as well. And next slide. Here in the Dark. I finished this book the other day, and it took all of my self-control not to spend my whole workday reading it at my desk. It has one of the most unique and craziest twists I've read in a thriller recently. It's perfect for fans of Alice Feeney and Christine Mangan. It's about Vivian Perry, who is an actress turned theater critic who ends up granting an interview that uncovers some very dark secrets. And she later learns that her interviewer has been killed, and she was the last one to see him alive. So she takes it upon herself to investigate the crime, which leads her to meet a wide variety of dangerous people and uncover a myriad of lies. It's gripping, propulsive, and shot through with menace and dark glamour. Here in the Dark takes us behind the scenes of New York theater, lifting the curtain on the lies we tell ourselves and each other. Readers of Gillian Flynn's sharp objects will find much to look forward to in these compelling pages, but so will readers who are interested in subject matters that tackle substance abuse and or addiction in the vein of Emmy Award-winning show Euphoria. And this comes a lot from the author's real life. She was a theater critic, so she has all of that background to really take from. And next slide. Funny Feelings. This is about a comedian whose star is on the rise, and she must fake date her manager / longtime friend in order to stir up publicity for herself. Even though her manager has sworn off the spotlight for himself, he'll do whatever he can to help her realize her dreams. But when their fake relationship grows increasingly more real, they must finally face the funny feelings they have for each other head on. This has that great fake dating trope, comedy theme, and found family aspect. Not to mention it's from a rising book talk star, which we know is all the hype right now. And next. The Serpent and the Wings of Night. The many, many readers who join the Romantasy fandom after reading and loving Fourth Wing, From Blood and Ash, and ACOTAR are going to want to dive into this one next. It's a self-published phenomenon that we snapped up, and I'm so happy because I am so obsessed with it. It's about the adopted human daughter of the Vampire King who enters a bloody, dangerous tournament that's her only chance to be something other than prey in this world. Winning won't be easy, and she makes an alliance with a dangerous rival. Next, The Fund. This is a deep dive into the largest hedge fund in the world, Bridgewater Associates, and its former leader, Ray Dalio. Copeland interviewed those inside and close to the firm in order to get a clear picture of what Dalio is really like and how the firm runs. Tracing more than 50 years of Dalio's leadership, the fund peels back the curtain to reveal a world of wealth and power where former FBI Director Jim Comey kisses Dalio's ring, recent Pennsylvania Senate candidate David McCormick sells out, and countless Bridgewater acolytes describe what it's really like to work at this fascinating firm. Next up is Absolution. Alex McDermott is back with her first novel in 6 years following The Ninth Hour. And here we have a novel flipping from present day to the 1960s, from Maryland to Vietnam, filled with urgent questions about race, colonialism, family, motherhood, and religion. This is the account of two young American wives in 1963, determined to relieve the suffering of the orphaned and sick children around them. And 60 years later, in present day, one of the women and the daughter of the other take a look back at their shared lives and come to terms with how they are living now. Next slide. Calamity. So this is coming from our new imprint Bramble this fall, which everyone is very excited about. And this is the imprint's inaugural debut that is equal parts steamy interstellar romance and sci-fi adventure, perfect for fans of Firefly and Alona Andrews. A spaceship captain is hired for a scouting mission on a backwater desert planet, but is saddled with the son of the terrifying elite family who hired them, and sparks fly as they encounter volcanic eruptions, secret cultists, and deadly galactic fighters. With just the right level of sci-fi elements, great banter, great action, and steamy romance, I absolutely love this and was so excited because it's the start to a new series, so there's a lot more where this is coming from. And next, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Lord. Here, Bridgerton meets Agatha Christie in this delightful also start to a new series set in early 1800s London. Here we have Lady Petra Forsyth, who is fiercely independent, and when the love of her life is killed in an accident, she pledges never to marry. Then one of her longtime friends passes away mysteriously, and she throws herself into investigating what actually happened to her, not just what people are saying happened to her. In the process, she discovers a secret asylum where men can lock their misbehaving wives away. As she deepens her research, Petra realizes she may be putting her own life in danger as well. Described as a steamier than most cozies romance, this is a historical mystery with a truly modern feel, featuring a delightfully feminist storyline. Lady Petra is the perfect protagonist for the series, utterly charming, incredibly clever, and with no patience for patriarchal nonsense. Next slide. Above the Salt. This is based on a true story, a moving saga of a couple torn apart while immigrating from Portugal to the US, only to be reunited in the midst of the Civil War after both their lives have changed greatly. They'll have to make impossible decisions and overcome difficult obstacles in order to be together. It is a captivating and beautiful tribute to the power of true love and the sacrifices we make to harness it. It's a sweeping story that spans generations and historical moments and is tinged with both love and conflict. Next slide. A True Account is about a woman who takes to the seas at the end of the golden age of piracy. Then in 1930, a professor is putting together her life story and finds a centuries-old mystery that she is determined to solve. Together, these dual timelines make up the unforgettable story of two women in very different worlds, both shattering the rules of their own society and daring to risk everything to go out on their own account, perfect for fans of Anna North's Outlawed, The Lost Apothecary, and The Starless Sea. And next slide. On the plus side, this is What Not to Wear and Queer Eye meets all the feels, and it's a sparkling romantic comedy in which the new guest on a popular makeover show has her style and her love life transformed when she and a grumpy cameraman find a connection that sends the show's ratings into a frenzy when they're caught on camera. This is a great reality TV rom-com, like one to watch, and spoiler alert. And as with Jenny's previous book, The Makeup Test, this is a fat positive love story where a heroine does not have to lose weight in order to find her happy ending. And next, the final one today, The Lost Cause. It's 30 years from now. We're making progress mitigating climate change slowly but surely, but what about all the angry old people who can't let go? This asks, what do we do about the people who cling to their belief that their own children are actually the enemy? And that is all for me. Next slide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Booklist. As always, again, here's all of our contact info, so please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Samantha. And now we'll hear from Melissa Croce. Melissa is the Senior Marketing Manager for Adult Library Titles at Simon & Schuster. She's been with the company since 2020, and when she's not reading everything from romance novels to narrative nonfiction, she likes to root for her many favorite hockey teams, play D&D, and watch K-dramas. Thanks for being here today, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me, Booklist, and thank you to everybody who is joining today. I'm going to now dive into some upcoming fall 2023 titles. Next. All right, from your forever favorite authors, first up, Stephen King's Holly marks the triumphant return of beloved King character Holly Gibney. Readers have witnessed Holly's gradual transformation from a shy recluse in Mr. Mercedes to Bill Hodges' partner in Finders Keepers to a full-fledged, smart, and occasionally tough PI in The Outsider. In King's new novel, Holly is on her own and up against a pair of unimaginably depraved and brilliantly disguised adversaries. And from one of the most brilliant and beloved writers of her generation, Let Us Descend by Jessamine Ward is a reimagining of American slavery, searching, harrowing, and overflowing with transcendent love, while Ward leads readers through the descent of Black American grief and joy. Her fourth novel is ultimately a story of rebirth and reclamation. And I read this recently, and I read it in one sitting, and I can say that it is extremely excellent. And from #1 New York Times bestselling author Janet Ivanovich, she is in her top form in her 30th book of the Stephanie Plum series, Dirty 30, as she sends her intrepid protagonist on the trail of a stolen cache of dirty diamonds. As the body count rises and witnesses start to disappear, it won't be easy for Stephanie to keep herself clean when everyone else is playing dirty. It's a good thing that she isn't afraid of getting a little dirty too. Next. Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll proposes a new narrative inspired by evidence that's been glossed over for decades in favor of more salable headlines. That the so-called brilliant and charismatic serial killer from Seattle was far more average than the countless books, movies, and primetime specials have led us to believe, and that it was the women whose lives he cut short who were truly the exceptional ones. And from Nancy Juyeon Kim, the New York Times bestselling author of The Last Story of Mina Lee, returns with What We Kept to Ourselves, a riveting page-turner that follows the fractured Kim family who are mourning their missing matriarch, Sunny. Things go from bad to worse when a dead stranger turns up in their backyard, and when it's discovered that he's carrying a letter to Sunny, it reveals secrets that have been brewing for decades, ever since Sunny was pregnant and an alone immigrant in Los Angeles. And then Naomi Alderman, the best-selling award-winning author of The Power, delivers The Future, a dazzling tour de force where Martha, who grew up in a cult and now works for a social media mogul, and Lai Zhen, a famous internet survivalist, have to team up and plot a daring heist to save the world from tech giants whose greed threatens life as we know it. Next. All right, for some quirky literary fiction, here is Mona Awad, the critically acclaimed author of Bunny. This is Rouge, a horror-tinted gothic fairy tale, think Snow White meets Eyes Wide Shut, about a lonely dress shop clerk named Belle, who, while investigating her mother's unexpected death, is lured into the barbed embrace of the same lavish, culty-like spa to which her mother was devoted. There, Belle discovers the frightening secret behind her and her mother's obsession with the mirror and everything youthful and looking young, and what lurks on the other side of the glass. Will she be able to escape her mother's fate? In Death Valley by Melissa Broder, a woman flees to the California high desert to escape family tragedies. Out on the sun-scorched trail, the woman encounters a towering cactus with a gash through its side that beckons like a familiar door. I personally would back away from this cactus, but this protagonist instead enters it. What awaits her inside this mystical succulent sets her on a journey that is at once both desolate and rich, hilarious and poignant. And author Christine Coulson spent 25 years writing for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. During that time, she dreamt of using the Met's strict label format to describe people as intricate works of art. The result is One Woman Show, a bullet of a novel, which revolves around the life of Kitty Whitaker as she is defined by her potential for display and is moved from collection to collection through multiple marriages. Coulson precisely distills each stage of this sprawling life, every brief snapshot in time, a wry reflection on womanhood, ownership, value, and power. Next. Now here are some memoirs. With echoes of Educated and Born a Crime, How to Say Babylon by Sophia Sinclair is the stunning story of the author's struggle to break free of her rigid Rastafarian upbringing, ruled by her father's strict patriarchal views and repressive control of her childhood, to find her own voice as a woman and poet. I just finished this book recently, and it is so riveting. You can tell that Sophia has a background as a poet. It's lyrical. It reads like fiction. I could not put it down. Next, we have In the Form of a Question by Amy Schneider. This is an inspirational and bold memoir from the most successful woman ever to compete on Jeopardy, who made history and won an even greater prize. The joy of being on national television and blazing a trail for openly queer and transgender people around the world. Now she shares her singular journey that led to becoming an unlikely icon and a hero to millions. And from Stephanie Land, the New York Times bestselling author who inspired the hit Netflix series Made, comes Class. Maid was a story about a house cleaner, but it was also a story about a woman with a dream. In class, Lan takes us with her as she finishes college and pursues her writing career, painting an intimate and heartbreaking portrait of motherhood as it converges and often conflicts with personal desire and professional ambition. Next. All right, hot topic nonfiction. From Walter Isaacson, who's written critically acclaimed biographies on Leonardo da Vinci, Steve Jobs, Benjamin Franklin, and Albert Einstein, is back with Elon Musk, a book on the most terminally online man and billionaire. For 2 years, Isaacson shadowed Musk and spent hours interviewing him, his friends, his family, coworkers, and even his adversaries. The result is this revealing inside story. This is perfect for book clubs who love to tackle controversial and relevant topics. And then in Glossy, this is a bombshell expose that reveals for the first time exactly what happened at the ultra-popular startup Glossier. Journalist and author Marissa Meltzer combines in-depth interviews with former employees, investors, and Emily Weiss, the founder herself, to bring readers inside the walls of this fascinating and secretive company. From fundraising to product launches and unconventional hiring practices, Meltzer exposes the inner workings of Glossier's culture, culminating the story of Emily Weiss herself. Next. All right, in anticipation for spooky witch season, here are a couple books for your readers. This is Square of Sevens by Laura Shepard Robinson, Cornwall, 1730. A young girl named Red travels with her father by making a living predicting fortunes using the ancient Cornish method of the Square of Sevens. Upon her father's death, Red is taken in and raised by a gentleman scholar, and she soon becomes known around Bath as a genteel lady whose fortune-telling is all the rage at all of the high society parties. But she must leave Bath to pursue answers to the questions that knot her soul, including who was her mother, how did she die, and who are her father's mysterious enemies. Red must journey across England, rubbing elbows with both the low and high classes, and her quest brings her the possibility of great reward, but it also leads to grave danger. And for readers of Margaret Atwood and Hilary Mantel, The Witching Tide by Margaret Mayer is an immersive literary debut inspired by true historical events. East Anglica, England, 1645. Martha is a mute midwife, healer, and servant who has lived peacefully for more than 4 decades in her beloved seaside village of Cleftwater. One autumn morning, a sinister newcomer, witchfinder Silas Makepeace, appears in town and enlists the powerless Martha to search the accused women for, quote, devil's marks. In desperation, she revives a wax witching doll that belonged to her mother in the hopes that it would bring protection. But the doll's true powers are unknowable. Martha harbors a terrible secret, and the gallows are looming. Next. All right, so for romance, In the Long Game by Elena Armas. When soccer executive Adeline Reyes goes viral for an altercation with the team's mascot, she is sent to middle of nowhere, North Carolina, where she is tasked with turning around the struggling local soccer team as her penance. There, she meets Cameron Caldani, a mysterious goalkeeping prodigy, who is the perfect candidate to help Adeline, except he is dead set on running her out of town. This is perfect for fans of Ted Lasso. And in Wildfire by Hannah Grace, this is the companion follow-up to Icebreaker, and this follows Russ and Aurora, who, after a sizzling one-night stand, unexpectedly reconnect at the summer camp where they are both counselors. They have undeniable chemistry, but they have to adhere to a very strict no fraternizing rule amongst the staff. Will the two learn to peacefully coexist, or did their one night together start a fire that they can't put out? And finally, in Second Chances in Newport Stephen by T.J. Alexander, author of Chef's Kiss, Eli Ward hasn't been back to his suffocating hometown in Newport Stephen, Florida in ages. Post-transition and sober, he is a completely different person from the one who left many years ago. But when a scandal threatens his career as a TV writer and comedian, he has no choice but to return home for the holidays. And just when he thinks that his trip can't get any worse, he bumps into his high school ex, Nick Wu, who is a divorced father and somehow hotter than ever. Against the backdrop of one weird Floridian Christmas, the two must decide whether to leave the past in the past or move on together. Next. All right, that is everything from me. Please visit simonandschuster.net/library, where you can browse all of our resources, including the 3 featured here. We have resources for One Book, One Community Reads. We have the book drop, which has recommendations for every season provided by myself and my team members. And then our book club favorites page, which is meant for, smaller book clubs at your libraries. You can also find most, if not all, of the titles that I presented here on Edelweiss or NetGalley, so you can request and download them to read. Thank you so much again for having me, everyone.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And now we'll hear from Golda Rademacher. Golda is the Library Sales and Marketing Director at WW Norton. You can sign up for her monthly newsletter for ARC giveaways and find her on Twitter and Instagram at WW Norton Library. Welcome, Golda.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Annie, and thank you to everybody for joining us today. I will start out with highlights of a few titles that I've already presented in other places, and then move on to some you might not have heard about yet. So first up, we have a new book by Michael Lewis called Going Infinite, coming out in October. In this book, Michael Lewis tells the story of Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX's spectacular collapse. Emily Wilson received so much praise for her translation of the Odyssey, published in 2017, and now she has tackled the Iliad. And I want to mention that Fantagraphics is publishing a new book by Daniel Clowes called Monica in October. Digging Stars by Novuyo Rosa Chuma is a mix of a campus novel of family secrets and figuring out your place in the world and celebrating the democratic spirit of knowledge. The Starred Kirkus Review called it a heady stew of science, family drama, and political intrigue. While roads are so ubiquitous they're practically invisible to us, wild animals experience them as entirely alien forces of death and disruption. In Crossings, environmental journalist Ben Goldfarb travels throughout the United States and around the world to investigate how roads have transformed our planet. And he looks at the innovation and experimentation that is being done to try to mitigate the effect of roads on wildlife in order to create a better future for all living beings. This is the third edition of the Best Mystery Stories of the Year, produced by Penzler Publishers. This one is edited by Amar Tolles, and it comes out in hardcover, paperback, and ebook all at the same time, so you can choose which format works best for your library. David McCloskey is a former CIA analyst, and his first book, Damascus Station, got a ton of great reviews. His new novel, Moscow X, is both a gripping thriller of modern espionage and an unsparing commentary on the nature of truth, loyalty, and vengeance amid the shadow war between the United States and Russia. MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios, is the unauthorized behind-the-scenes story of the rise of the most transformative cultural phenomenon of our time, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Joanna Robinson, Dave Gonzalez, and Gavin Edwards draw on more than 100 interviews with actors, producers, directors, and writers to present the definitive chronicle of Marvel Studios all the way up to the shocking departures of multiple executives in 2023. Dishy and authoritative, MCU is the first book to tell the Marvel Studios story in full, while giving us an essential account of American mass culture. Fierce Ambition is a spirited portrait of 20th century war correspondent Maggie Higgins and her tenacious fight to the top in a male-dominated profession. She first catapulted to fame with her dramatic account of the liberation of Dachau at the end of World War II. Her notoriety soared during the Cold War, and her daring dispatches from Korea garnered a Pulitzer Prize for foreign correspondence, the first granted to a woman for frontline reporting. Drawing on new and extensive research, journalist and historian Janet Conant restores Maggie's rightful place in history as a woman who paved the way for the next generation of journalists and one of the greatest war correspondents of her time. In The Race to Be Myself, world champion runner Caster Semenya offers an empowering account of her life and her trailblazing battle to compete on her own terms. She was born with naturally elevated levels of testosterone, and her life and career were devastated by accusations that she was not a woman and should not compete against other women. Her situation surfaced a still raging firestorm over our understanding of gender and how gender plays out in sports, as well as our expectations of female athletes. The Race to Be Myself tells the coming-of-age story of an iconic athlete, of Semenya's dramatic journey from a self-trained novice to the pinnacle of her sport, and takes readers behind the scenes of her inspiring battle to run in the body she was born with. Carl Safina is the author of Becoming Wild and Beyond Words. In Alfie and Me, he tells the story of an orphaned screech owl that he and his wife rescued. They expected the owl to fly off once it was healed, but Alfie stayed around and became a part of their life. Safina's relationship with the owl made him want to explore the ways people have viewed humanity's relationship with nature across cultures and throughout history. Interwoven with Safina's observations and insight, the book offers a view of existence from Alfie's perspective. The Liberators by E.J. Co spans continents and 4 generations of 2 Korean families forever changed by fateful past decisions made in love and war. Extraordinarily beautiful and deeply moving, The Liberators is an elegant family saga of memory, trauma, and empathy, and a testament to the consequences and fortunes of inheritance. In Becoming Ella Fitzgerald, Judith Tick's compelling narrative describes Fitzgerald's complicated career in fresh and original detail and shows a powerful woman who set a standard for American excellence nearly unmatched in the 20th century. The Waters is the new novel by Bonnie Jo Campbell, author of Once Upon a River. Set in small-town Western Michigan, The Waters follows 11-year-old Dorothy, who spends her days searching for truth in the lush landscape and in her math books, waiting for her wayward mother and longing for a father, unaware that family secrets and violent men will flood through the swamp and upend her idyllic childhood. There's a bit of women versus men, Christians versus pagans, and wild women in the swamp all mixed up in this novel. Wild and Distant Seas is a debut novel that follows 4 generations of women, starting with Evangeline, whose encounter with a sailor called Ishmael leads to choices that ripple through generations and across continents. Moving, beautifully written, and elegantly conceived, Wild and Distant Seas takes Moby Dick as a starting point, but Tara Carr Roberts brings 4 remarkable women to life in a spellbinding epic all her own. Who Owns This Sentence is a fascinating and thought-provoking history of copyright. This enlightening cultural, legal, and global history of the idea that intangible things can be owned makes a persuasive case for seeing copyright as an engine of inequality in the 21st century. When we announced King Nix, we heard from several excited fans of Kirsten Backus's first novel, Lives of the Monster Dogs. This atmospheric, compelling novel reimagines the life of Anna Filing Fort, whose husband, Charles Fort, was the most famous anomalist of the early 20th century. A feminist tale with the mood and mystery of a classic Gothic novel, King Nix reintroduces readers 25 years after her acclaimed debut to an incredibly imaginative storyteller. For over a decade, Lee Morgan has treated dogs on site at the Iditarod. In 4,000 Paws, he tells the story of the heroic canine athletes who, using only their muscle and an innate drive to race, carry handlers between frozen outposts, risking injury, illness, and fatigue. From the Huskies of Iditarod's past to the dauntless dogs of today, Morgan shows how these competitors surmount the dangers of the Arctic and gives us an intimate look into the animal mind. Bad Animals is a shrewd, captivating novel about a disgraced small-town librarian, a famous novelist, and how their unlikely alliance provokes penetrating questions of empathy, infidelity, and appropriation. We're launching a new series this fall called Norton Shorts, which has leading scholars writing eye-opening books that deliver fresh perspectives in under 200 pages. Wild Girls and Against Techno-Ableism come out in September, and Imagination by Ruha Benjamin comes out next February, and we have several more on the schedule. So here's a peek at a few more winter titles. Graphic novel fans will be very excited to hear that My Favorite Thing is Monsters Book 2 is finally coming out in April. And David Small has a new collection of graphic novel stories called Werewolf at Dusk coming in March. Norton distributes several other independent publishers like Tin House, New Directions, Fantagraphics, and Mysterious Press. And starting in January, we will be adding on The Experiment and Akashic. So I'm excited to learn more about their titles and add them to our list. And finally, I do print ARC giveaways in the library newsletter, which you can sign up for through the library marketing link on the slide. You can also find our catalogs through this link on the slide. And thank you all for listening today. And thank you so much for all of the work that you do in your communities. And I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thank you so much, Golda. We'll now hear from Yesenia Corporan. Yesenia is the Wholesale Sales and Academic and Library Marketing Coordinator at Hachette Book Group. She is a native New Yorker who loves to read everything from Ghetto Gastro Presents Black Power Kitchen to Pachinko, all while curling up with her 8-year-old French Bulldog, Lola. Thanks for joining us today, Yesenia.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Yesenia Corporan. I'm excited to be here and to get to share with you all some of our upcoming fall titles, primarily September to November 2023. Many of these have digital copies posted on Edelweiss and NetGalley. And please contact us at library@hbgusa.com if you have any questions. Thank you. And let's begin with our nonfiction titles. Next slide. Great. So first up, we have pockets. Have you ever bought a blazer and when you went to put your hands in your pockets, found that it's just a decorative line that's been sewn shut? It's the worst. Or on the other hand, have you ever bought a dress and realized that it suddenly had pockets? Best feeling ever. I never knew how many feelings I had about pockets until I learned about this book. In this abundantly illustrated 4-color book, Hannah Carlson, who teaches in the apparel design department at the Rhode Island School of Design, asks a question many women are asking every day. Why do men get so many pockets, but women do not? This pocket history is about a lot more than the politics of gender. Among her other questions, what did Walt Whitman do to usher in a new attitude toward pockets? Why are the contents of Abraham Lincoln's pockets the most popular exhibit at the Library of Congress? And what's the future of pockets as technology develops? Spoiler, it's a lot. Next slide. Great. Next, we have PAX. So Tom Holland is the co-presenter of the Rest is History podcast, the #1 history podcast in Europe with over 360 active listeners. In his newest title, PAX, Holland brings us the history of Rome at the very pinnacle of her greatness, the Pax Romana, the empire's golden age. Stretching from Caledonia to Arabia, Rome ruled over a quarter of the world's population. It was the wealthiest and most formidable state in history of humankind. Holland shows ancient Rome in all her glory, from the destruction of Jerusalem and Pompeii to building the Colosseum. Tom vividly sketches the lives of Romans, both ordinary and spectacular, and shows that Roman peace was the fruit of unprecedented military violence. Next slide. Everything I learned in a Chinese restaurant. 1980s Detroit was a volatile place to live, but above the fray stood a safe haven, Chung's Cantonese cuisine, where anyone from the city's first Black mayor to the local drag queens to elderly Jewish couples could sit down for a warm, home-cooked meal. Here was where, beneath a bright red awning and surrounded by his multi-generational family, filmmaker and activist Curtis Chin came of age, where he learned to embrace his identity as a gay, American-born Chinese, where he navigated the divided city's spiraling misfortunes, and where between helpings of almond boneless chicken, sweet and sour pork, and some of his own less savory culinary concoctions, he realized just how much he had to offer the world, to his beloved family, and to himself. Next slide. He, she, they. Skylar Baylor didn't set out to be an activist, but his very public transition to the Harvard men's swim team put him in the spotlight. His choice to be open about his transition and share his experience has touched people around the world. His plain-spoken education has evolved into tireless advocacy for inclusion and collective liberation. In He, She, They, Skylar uses storytelling and the art of conversation to give us the essential language and context of gender, meeting everyone where they are and paving the way for understanding acceptance, and most importantly, connection. More than a book on allyship, He, She, They speaks to trans folks directly, answering the question, does it get better? With a resounding yes. Myth-busting, affirming, compassionate, and fierce, He, She, They is a crucial, urgent, and life-saving book that forever changes the conversation about gender. Next slide. It's not you, it's capitalism. Malika Jabali has a provocative plan for us. She invites us to break up with capitalism. Malika thoughtfully outlines the sexiness and dateability of socialism with data, graphs, stats, accessible explanations, and illustrations. This book will show you that we need to build a world that's safer, kinder, cleaner, healthier, and more eco, and that this isn't a utopian dream. It's within our grasp if we collectively decide to call out capitalism for what it really is and wake up for a better future. Next slide. Now on to our fiction titles. We're starting off with Distant Suns, a new gripping, immersive, and gorgeously written thriller by New York Times bestselling author Tim Johnston that is full of twists, secrets, and surprises. It follows the story of Sean Cortland and Dan Young, both drifters who find themselves in Wisconsin and soon forge a friendship while working as carpenters and plumbers for a man called Marion Devereaux. They are drawn into the lives of the townspeople who are all haunted by the disappearance of 3 young boys decades ago in the 1970s. As the paths of these characters converge, an irreversible chain of events is set in motion that culminates in shattering violence and the revelation of long-buried truths. I should add that although these characters have appeared in other Johnston's novels, this is a standalone. Next slide. The Sun Sets in Singapore. The Sun Sets in Singapore is a perfect for readers who love the relationships and career-focused energy of Queenie, the setting and insulated community feel and gossip of Crazy Rich Asians, and the structural setup of the expatriates. Between the novel's 3 protagonists, a lawyer, a banker, and a pianist, there's plenty of material propelling the plot forward, from affairs to workplace sabotage to the TID belief in reincarnation. Fans of Yassi, Britt Bennett, and Abby Dara will find the new book friend here. Next slide. A Grandmother Begins the Story. We're all excited for A Grandmother Begins the Story over here. We've all read it and are really enjoying it. Michelle Porter is the descendant of a long line of Métis storytellers and now makes her fiction debut with an enchanting and original story of the unrivaled desire for healing and the power of familial bonds. Written like a crooked Métis jig, A Grandmother Begins the Story follows 5 generations of women and the land and bison that surround them as they reach for the stories that could remake their worlds and rebuild their futures. Told by a chorus of vividly realized, funny, wise, confused, struggling characters, one of which is a bison, A Grandmother Begins the Story heralds the arrival of a stunning new voice in literary fiction. This book will be a great book for book clubs and can start great conversations about generational trauma and healing and North American colonialism. Next slide. So we're happy to report that Elizabeth Crooks has a new book this fall, and the milestone is full of action, a lot of peril and humor, even when you're terrified up for the characters. There's even a stagecoach, but that makes sense since it's set in Texas in the year 1868. It follows a pregnant young woman and her son who are on the run from an abusive husband and the tradesman who helps them flee across Texas away from outlaws bent on revenge, even as an unlikely love blossoms. Next slide. And this one is more of a sneak peek into January 2024, and it's one that I'm actually reading right now and extremely excited about. I haven't been able to put it down since I started. Georgia Summer's debut is a dazzling achievement in storytelling that weaves together family curses, fickle gods, and keys to other worlds. It follows Violet Everly, the last in the Everly line, a family that for centuries have seen their brightest and best disappear, taken as punishment for a crime no one remembers and for a purpose no one understands. Their tormentor, a woman named Penelope, who never ages, never grows sick, and never forgives a debt. But now Penelope is looking for Violet's mother, Marianne, who vanished on a stormy night when Violet was just a child, determined to break the curse. Unable to find her, Penelope gives Violet an ultimatum. She has 10 years to find her mother, or she will take her place instead. This one is perfect for fans of Melissa Albert, Evan Morgenstern, and Alex E. Carroll. Next slide. Well, that's all that I have here. Thank you for having me once again. I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Yesenia. Finally, we'll hear from Elham Ali. Elham graduated from the University of Toronto in 2014, and since completing the Humber College Publishing Program, she's worked in marketing and publicity roles at Canada's Ballet Yorgan, Penguin Random House Canada, and Dundurn Press. She joined ECW Press as senior publicist in 2020 and has been serving as the trade marketing lead since 2021. Thanks for being here today, Elham.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be back and representing ECW at another Booklist webinar. I really love doing these. If you attended the Spring Mysteries webinar or have heard about ECW before, you'll know that our specialty is having something for absolutely everyone. And 2023 is a really special year for us because we're only expanding and diversifying our list even more. And I'm so excited to tell you about some of the biggest titles that we have coming this fall. I will preface this presentation by saying that this really is just a sneak peek, and choosing which titles to talk about was really, really hard. So I really hope that you'll check out our website, sign up for our library newsletter, or follow us on NetGalley to see some more of the amazing books that we have coming. Next slide, please. So just some really quick contact info before we start. If any of these titles interest you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. All of our titles are available at your favorite library wholesalers, or you can contact our sales director. So now onto the books. Next slide. Starting with nonfiction, the first book is My Body is Distant, a memoir by Paige Maylott. Paige is a writer and gamer based in Hamilton, Ontario, and her debut is part trans woman coming out story and part queer romance. This book explores the ways that virtual realities and fantasies can kind of seep into our real lives, and how the lives of our imagination, what those can teach us about ourselves. So the story begins in the 1980s when Paige discovered the game Zork, and it really sparked a lifelong love for video games that continues today. In her before life, Paige was exploring her authentic self and her sexuality via virtual realities, particularly games like Second Life that allowed her to be someone else. And these games really exposed a split in her life, but also inside of herself. On the one hand, IRL, Paige is dealing with a cancer diagnosis and an imploding marriage, while at the very same time, she has this fairy tale romance going on online. So the question then becomes how to take this carefully curated computer life and turn it into lasting and real happiness. My Body is Distant is an incredibly intimate and deeply vulnerable memoir about authenticity, belonging, and self-love. Paige is such a wonderful writer, and her openness and honesty really make it impossible not to cheer for her, just like Publishers Weekly said in their review. Next slide, please. The Matryoshka Memoirs by Sasha Colby is a family history that tackles a relatively unknown side of World War II. Reading this book, I learned that at least 12 million people were brought to Germany as forced laborers during World War II, the majority of them coming from Nazi-conquered territories in Central and Eastern Europe. And they actually made up about 20% of Germany's workforce at the time, working in farms and mines and factories to fill in the jobs that soldiers had left behind. One of those laborers was Sasha's grandmother, Irina, who at 19 was abducted from her home in Ukraine and brought to Germany to work in the Leica camera factory. The factory was owned by the Leitz family, and there they made optical equipment for the Nazis, but at the same time, the family was using the factory as a cover to smuggle hundreds of Jews out of Germany. It would later be known as the Leica Freedom Train. Decades later, and now living in Canada, Sasha starts to talk to her grandmother about her life and kind of piece together her story. And in her research, she discovers a parallel story of courage in Elsie Kuhn-Leitz, the Leica heiress who was imprisoned by the Nazis for excessive humanity. The memoir weaves together the lives of these three women across the years in this incredibly harrowing but still life-affirming story. It's also incredibly nuanced Sasha's really celebrating the Lights family and what they did, but also acknowledges that they did work for the Nazis. And so there's a lot of gray area in this. It's still joyful in the face of all this horror. Ultimately, it's a really incredible story of courage and survival, the different things that we will do to kind of continue living in these terrible circumstances. And I actually think that if you were attracted to The Porcelain Maker from earlier, from Macmillan's presentation, this will be a great co-read. So make sure to pick up the Matryoshka memoirs. Next slide. So I actually have to apologize before talking about this book. I completely glossed over the word adult and went straight to faves. And The Groomer is really one of my favorite books coming in fall. And so it was the first book I knew I had to talk about. But it is YA, but I'm an adult and this is one of my faves. So I'm going to very quickly talk about it. The Groomer by Neben Ruthnam is, you might know Neben from his adult books. This is his YA debut. As Nathan Ripley, he wrote Your Life Is Mine and Find You in the Dark. And he's also written A Hero for Our Time and Helpmeet. He really takes his horror sensibilities, which are fabulous, and combines it with this really fun, fast-paced story that actually also tackles serious issues like grief and racism. The main character, Vish, is a teen metalhead who struggles with feelings of alienation because he's one of the only brown kids in town, but also because his supposed friends told everyone in school about his dad's addiction problems. And so Vish really just wants to be left alone, but then a demon in a skin suit does a racism at him, and he finds himself dragged into this supernatural adventure and fighting to stop an interdimensional invasion. It's super, super fun, very horrific, also hilarious. And so if you are an adult who also loves YA, you should definitely pick up The Groomer. Next slide, please. Moving into adult fiction, the first title I wanted to talk about is a really beautiful one, Gin Turpentine Pennyroyal Rue by Christine Higdon. This is her sophomore novel following her 2018 debut, The Very Marrow of Our Bones. These are both books that tackle really deep and serious issues. They're really interested in the deep complexity of women's lives and women's relationships, particularly the scars that we leave on each other. And to quote the Toronto Star, these sort of grander mysteries of love and hate, survival and destruction. It's a tender and beautiful novel about love, but like a lot of love stories, it's kind of complicated. The novel is set in the 1920s in Vancouver and is centered around four sisters struggling to rebuild their lives in the wake of World War I. Georgina is the eldest, and she really resents her husband and dreams of getting an education and having her own life, while Morag is blissfully pregnant and very much in love with her husband, Llewellyn. Harriet Jean stays at home to care for their opium-addicted mother and is starting to wrestle with her growing feelings for another woman, and the youngest sister Isla is also pregnant, though nobody knows it, not her sisters, and definitely not the baby's father. When she decides to get a back alley abortion and it almost costs Isla her life, Llewellyn, Morag's husband, is bent on justice and revenge. But the question at the heart of this is, to what end? What will revenge do? What will it do for the sisters, for Isla, for the many women who suffer at the hands of butchers in hotel rooms and back alley kitchens? The novel moves back and forth between the lives of the sisters and interweaves their stories to explore the complex political and social realities of women living in the 1920s. And it is really hard to miss the ways that a lot of those realities mirror our own society today. In an author letter that I would love to share with you all, Christine wrote that the characters in Gin Turpentine Pennyroyal Rue work to forge a place for themselves in the world. They must break the law, they must challenge societal norms, they must hide their love and make spaces where they might be safe in the creative margins of society. This novel honors the lives of the millions of very real people, past and present, to whom we as women, and Christine as a queer woman, owe for the lives that we're able to lead now, and who are continuing to fight when those lives are threatened. They too are deserving of love and compassion and respect, and this book is really inspired and written for those people. Next slide, please. Between the Head and the Hands by James Charani is a queer Muslim coming-of-age story. Our main character, Michael, is confronted by his mother about his sexuality and subsequently kicked out of his home. He spends the next several years looking for love and belonging, but only finds a string of toxic relationships, including one with an older businessman and another with a former teacher. Michael's really losing himself in nights of sex and intrigue and drinking, but what he wants more than anything is to find connection and belonging. But he has to redefine what love means for himself before he can find that. James wrote this novel as part of the Lambda Literary's Writers Retreat for emerging LGBTQ writers under the tutelage of gay literary icon Andrew Holleran. It's an incredibly beautiful and candid coming-of-age story. Michael is such a wonderful character. You really love him. You want to hug him. You want to keep him safe, even as he's making some choices that you really might not agree with. And James's writing style is so wonderfully snappy and concise. And so I really hope you pick this one up. It's another one that I'm kind of obsessed with. Next slide, please. And finally, while we kind of look forward at all the new voices that ECW's bringing out, I also had to include one of our old favorites. The Legacy is the latest in the Joanne Kilbourne mystery series by Gail Bowen. Gail is the official Grand Master of crime writers in Canada and the queen of Canadian crime fiction. In her latest, Joan faces a threat rooted in her past when a former student comes back into her life and threatens to expose a hidden truth that could hurt everyone that she loves. It's the latest, like I said, in an incredibly beloved and very long-running series. Joanne made her debut in 1990, and in 2020, and 22 books later, she is still as sharp as ever. Fans really love being able to grow with Joanne. She's now 62. They really gotten to know her and her family, and she's definitely going to become one of your favorite sleuths. After reading this, there's obviously a long backlist that you can dig into, and now you can do that in audio too, as ECW is kind of going back and producing older books in the series in audio as well. Next slide, please. Thank you so much again for another wonderful webinar. And like I said, this is really just a sneak peek of the many, many amazing books that ECW has. So I really hope that you will reach out. I also wanted to let anyone who is attending know I'll be at Digipalooza in Cleveland this week. So please come by our table and say hi. We also have really big things coming in Day of Dialogue in October. And ECW is hosting another indie book social it's a virtual event that we do with 5 other Canadian indie presses on September 12th. You can learn about all of these events, everything that we have coming, by heading to our website, signing up for our indie or librarian newsletter. And yeah, do that. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Elham, and a big thank you. So many thank yous to all of our wonderful presenters today. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, title list, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like those you see here. Recently, ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom reported 1,269 demands to censor library books and resources in 2022. The highest number of attempted book bans since ALA began compiling data about censorship in libraries more than 20 years ago. Join the Unite Against Book Bans campaign to help protect the freedom to read and to empower readers everywhere. Visit uniteagainstbookbans.org for more info, resources to donate, and more. And remember that you can utilize Booklist to support your library's collection development choices with reviews backed by the ALA. We have a special webinar subscription offer, and don't forget that your subscription dollars help ALA advocate on behalf of libraries, assisting those facing an unprecedented number of book challenges. Email us at info@booklistonline.com for more information. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, and one more huge thank you to our amazing panelists and to our sponsors, Macmillan, Simon & Schuster, WW Norton Co, Hachette Book Group, and ECW Press. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time.